Hi, everybody. I would like to begin this week with a quick run through of some of the historical foundations of the study of public discourse. Okay, so I'm going to dive right in. Let's go. So the very first thing that I want to mention is this, okay? The study of public speaking is founded on the ideal of free speech. One of the things that I like to get to get out there right out of the gate is that this course exists because you live in a society that on some level values freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech is always being called into question in the United States. My entire life, I have been watching the news, I have been reading books and seeing things happen where people will go, my rights of free speech have been violated, and in some cases they're right, and in most cases they're wrong. So I just want to make this point. This is really important, okay? This is from Joshua Gunn. He's a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. He's written a public speaking textbook that's really fantastic. It's not the one we're using. It actually might be in the future. So if you're watching this in the future and when we're using it, cool, okay? But and the centuries-long study of public speaking, its teaching has never flourished outside of a democratic society. You can look in if you're watching. I mean, I don't know when you're seeing this. There's so many things that happen constantly. Free speech is in the news right now because Roseanne Barr tweeted something racist and got fired for it, and so not everyone. Some people are saying, it's a free speech issue, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between free speech and hate speech in just a minute. But folks, the fact that you have a public speaking class available in your education means you're in a society and culture that protects the right to speak freely on some level, okay? How does that look? We'll talk about that in just a second, but this is extremely important. You have the right to speak freely. You have the right to, like right now, I can stand up, I can record this screencast, I can stand up outside my office right here, and I could say, I disagree with the American government. I disagree with decisions that are being made, or I disagree with my state senator, or I disagree with my governor, or I disagree with the president. I can even critique or criticize decisions that are being made, and I will not be dragged out of my office and disappear forever for doing that, right? Now, the difference is this next thing. So I just want to get this out here, folks. You have the right to speak freely, and the fact that this class is even available is a sign of that, okay? But the thing that's not protected is hate speech, okay? Hate speech is not protected speech. And so, for example, I can stand up and I can say, I disagree with the government. I think they're making bad decisions. I disagree with my governor. I think that they're making bad decisions or whatever. I can say that. If I stand up outside my office and I spout racist, sexist speech, that's not protected speech. Okay? That stuff is very different than the freedom of speech. So folks, freedom of speech makes it possible to criticize, critique, and disagree with others without fear of punishment. It does not mean that I just say whatever I want, whenever I want, with zero consequences. Okay? Many, many, many people, in fact, most people that I've come across in my life don't really understand what freedom of speech or free speech means. And I'm not even like a lawyer who would have to go and fight a case on this. And so, how much do I even understand it? I understand it more than your average person, but I just want to be clear that that's what this means, okay? So it also means that you have the freedom to listen to others speak their minds. See, the freedom of speech means that you have the freedom to be exposed to different ideas, okay? People who live in countries or places where the freedom of speech is not there, it means they're not hearing as many different messages as we have now. Now, Right now, I'm a little overwhelmed with how many messages I have access to, but there is freedom in that, okay? And so that's one of the things I want to get out of the way right out the gate. The fact that this class is even a possibility means that you have the right to freedom of speech, okay? And it's a really wonderful thing. And so freaking exercise it and take your public speaking class. I'm glad you're and take it seriously, right? I get so frustrated when people are like, I don't want to. No, you have a voice. You have a right to say things and have your ideas heard. Okay. Now, this idea of freedom of speech comes from somewhere, so I'm going to move forward. All right. This idea of freedom of speech comes from. Here we are back in Athens, Greece. If you do anything in Western education, you're going to get back to Athens at some point, okay? You're going to have to talk about the city-state. I am not going to go into detail on any of these things because you would get a lot of this in a Western Civ class or a philosophy course. Here's what I have to say, okay? For us in this class, there's a shift in society that happens, and it facilitates the development of public discourse as an art. For the ancient Greek Athenian folk, to label public discourse as an art is significant, okay? Art, for something to be classified as an art, means a lot. It's not just, hey, look, I made something. No, for it to be an art, it has to inherently possess virtue. It has to lead us toward truth. It has to lead us to something larger, okay? So this idea that public discourse is an art form is a big deal. I always like to tell my public speaking classes to treat public speaking class like an art class, okay? Change the way you think about public speaking. This is an art form. This is something that you are going to create something. Right now, there's nothing you've created. By the end of this course, you are going to have created something. You're going to have a product. You're going to have multiple products that you have displayed, that you have performed, that you have done in front of an audience. You've exercised your democratic right to speak in front of an audience, and you've created something, hopefully beautiful, hopefully moving, hopefully, and even if there's tension in there, there is still beauty in that. Okay, so this is just a really big deal. I'm going to move forward quickly. Okay. In this shift, you've got some of the big thinkers. And in the Western world, we're going to start, you've got the pre-Socratics. I'm going to hit the big ones, okay? Because this is a basic public speaking class. You've got Socrates. There are the dates Socrates is around for. And so I'm not going to go into big depth here. I am not showing all of these thinkers in a way that is almost criminal because there's so much here that's very rich and very interesting to dig into. But Socrates is known for his claim to know nothing is truth. Just saying wisdom is knowing that I don't know. Okay, and that was sort of the backbone of his teaching. Now, stuff that applies to us specifically in a public speaking class, Socrates says that responsibility must accompany the power of public discourse. Socrates famously referred to sort of the mass of people as just like a bunch of dumb animals, and that whoever was in power could like say and then they would do. And so he says that this responsibility is on the speaker. So you as the speaker, when you're exercising your right, you have a responsibility. Okay? You have to understand the power of what you're doing, understand the words that you're saying, understand what it can do with your audience. And so we're going to talk about audience and that in a future lesson. But that there's also responsibility on the audience. The audience should take what's being said with a grain of salt and say, okay, who is this person? What is their motivation? What are they trying to get from this? What is their purpose? What is going on? This week we're going to be talking about topic and purpose, and not only should the speaker worry about those things, so should the audience, okay? So folks, that's me nutshelling Socrates. I think I talked about Socrates in like 90 seconds. That makes me feel wrong inside, but we need to move forward, okay? So next we have Plato. Plato is a student of Socrates, okay? And so what that means is and by the way, Plato is the one who's done all the writing for Socrates. Socrates is a character in Plato's dialogues and stuff like that. Socrates was real. There's evidence he was real, but Plato is the one who did all the writing. And so Plato's a student of Socrates. We're not going to worry about this thing on sophistic rhetoric right now. Here's what Socrates says. Not Socrates, but Plato. Plato says, Plato is sitting there listening to Socrates, all right? He's actually going to be the one writing up Socrates' arguments. And Plato goes, okay, wait a minute, Socrates. Socrates says, wisdom is knowing I don't know. I don't know anything is truth. But Plato says you have to know the truth to speak the truth, because even if you wrap your mind around this, okay? Even if you're able to know that you don't know, Socrates, that means you know something. You can't claim to not know that you know nothing is truth. So he says you have to know the truth to speak the truth, okay? And he then begins to articulate how you can know things. He's got his allegory of the cave. He's got his theory of forms. I mean, there's this one line of you have to know the truth to speak the truth. There are volumes of ways that he unpacks that idea, okay? And then he starts to talk about non-artistic and genuine arts, okay? Public speaking being a genuine art, okay, for him. Now, let's hit Aristotle. Aristotle is probably the biggest of the three. The impact is impossible to capture of Aristotle, okay? If you go and you study, it's Aristotle's everywhere. He's known as the sort of the grandfather of Western logic. You actually know more Aristotle than you think, okay? You're actually taught to think in ways that Aristotle articulated that we should, all right? So Aristotle is a student of Plato, actually, okay? So you've got Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Plato being a student of Socrates, Aristotle being a student of Plato. So he researched everything. He got his hands dirty in so many ways. Some of them interesting, some of them not. Some of them frightening. But he was interested in everything. Everything, okay? Physical sciences, social sciences, all of it. So one of the ways that you're going to have known Aristotle before are his proofs, his ways of knowing. Now, here we have again the word art, right? So Plato was doing the difference between the inartistic and the genuine art. Aristotle takes that and kind of makes his own ways of knowing out of it, okay? So remember, all of these thinkers are looking for virtue, looking for truth, and this is their way of getting at it. Now, so Aristotle says there are proofs, there are ways of knowing, and you have, first are the inartistic. So for example, if I were a prosecution attorney and I'm arguing that the defendant killed the victim, I would bring in the bloody knife, okay? And I would say, here is the bloody knife. The victim's blood is on the blade. The fingerprints of the defendant are on the handle. Case closed. That's an inartistic proof. That's an inartistic way of knowing for Aristotle, okay? Now, there are artistic ways of knowing for Aristotle. You're going to have heard these before, okay? So I know that you're not in the room with me right now, but as I bring these up, you may groan out loud in your living room or bedroom or Starbucks, wherever you're watching this, okay? The artistic ways of knowing are ethos, pathos, and logos. Oh, again, yes, again. That's actually Aristotle, and it's brilliant, okay? There's a reason why it shows up in your composition classes. There's a reason why it shows up here. The reason ethos, pathos, and logos show up are because it's right, it's accurate, it's real, it works, okay? You have ethos, credibility or ethics. You have pathos, the use of emotion. And you have logos, the use of logic appeals. And what Aristotle says is that you can have inartistic ways of knowing, but you also have these other ways of knowing. And so I could even bring in the bloody dagger as an inartistic way of knowing, but then I could use ethos, pathos, and logos to show how that's not actually accurate. Of course the fingerprints are on there. It's a stolen knife. The person who actually killed the victim stole the knife from the defendant. So yeah, that's the murder weapon, but he didn't do it, right? I can use pathos. I can use logos. There's all sorts of different ways that we can put this stuff together. I'm going to hit pause and move to a second screencast to finish this up, okay? I'll see you in part 2.